Hey besties, and welcome back to the 10th and final episode of Season 1 for the Your Two Best Friends podcast with your co-hosts Annalise and myself, Danielle Hanlon. We're so thankful for everyone who's listened in and supported us over these last 10 episodes. And Annalise and myself, we've had so much fun recording and thinking of topics and just going along this journey with you guys. We really had no idea what kind of response we'd get, what feedback we've gotten, and it's been so much better than we could have ever imagined. So we're so thankful for everyone who's supporting us and listening in. And we hope that we've been able to edify you in some way and encourage and equip you in your walk with Christ, because that is our goal. Just a reminder, which we'll say at the end, our next season will come out April 15th for season 2, and we're excited to join you again with that. Today's topic we're going to talk about is going to be friendship and all general things with Christian friendship and Annalise and I's experiences about becoming better friends and more Christ-like friends. And so we thought it would be a really fun episode to end our season with, as it is one of the other reasons we started our podcast, Pure Friendship, and what that has done for her and I's walk with Christ, specifically our friendship together, but with so many other friends that we've had in our life that have pointed us closer to the Lord. So I'm going to let Annalise take it away and start our episode off. Annalise, what is the importance of friendship in the Christian walk, and do you think it's a necessary piece of following Jesus?
I definitely think that it is a necessary part of the Christian walk. And I think this because we are created in the image of God. Okay, so that means that when the Lord created us, that we reflect back to Him parts of who He is. And God is a triune God. And so that means that He is a part of the Trinity. There's the Father, there's the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And they are each in relationship with one another. They're still God, but they're all in relationship with one another. And so because we, as believers, are also created in the image of God, that means that we also are created for relationship. And so we can see that example in the way that God, His being, is. And then we can also see it in examples within the Bible, like Jesus. And so Jesus had His 12 disciples, and then there were some friends that He had in addition, like Mary and Martha and Lazarus. But then He has His 12 disciples, and then even smaller, His inner circle. There is Peter, there's James, and there's John. And with those people, He lets them in a little bit more. He has certain experiences only with those individuals, and He shares certain things with only those people. And so we can not only, we start to see an example of what friendship can look like, and even this idea of having maybe more extended group of friends, but then having a smaller, more intimate circle of friends who are closer to us that we maybe share more intimate personal things with in our life.
Yeah, I think if Jesus needed to have friends on this earth when He was alive, I think we definitely need friends as well. And Jesus's friendships probably looked a little bit different than ours. He obviously was the Son of God, and so He's teaching them and He's their rabbi at the same time. But He very much is also their friend. He loved them. We see, like, when Lazarus died, and Jesus, before He raised him from the dead, He was weeping at the tomb. I mean, He was a dear friend that had passed away, and Jesus knew He was going to raise him from the dead, but yet still wept because it was His friend that was dead. And so I think another thing that emphasizes the importance of friendship is that verse in Proverbs where it talks about iron sharpens iron, and how people, friendship is like that. It's like iron sharpening iron. You become more Christ-like by being around people because you grow the most around other people. And what we mean by that is, like, when you're in a group, the real you's coming out, whether that's good or that's bad. If you're prone to just, for example, gossip or things like that. You don't do that when you're sitting by yourself at home and like hanging out on your phone. You're not like gossiping. But when you're in a group, you really start to see some things come out that you're like, oh, shoot, like that is not really aligned with Christ, or that's not who I really want to be. Things that you wouldn't realize if you were just on your own. And so the being in those friendships, being in relationship with people, help you see things in your life that aren't aligned with Christ that they can point to if you can't see it, but also helps you grow in grace in that. They're not just going to cut you off because you know have been a bad friend, or they're not going to cut you off for a sin, because everybody sins, but they're pointing you towards Christ and making you want to become better. So I would definitely say friendship is necessary for the Christian walk in following Jesus. When we want to emulate his life, that's what we see him do. He's in relationship. Like Annalise said, we're emulating and connecting with the Father when we're in relationship with other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's so good what you were saying about how if we were just sitting by ourselves, right, we wouldn't necessarily notice these things within us. And that's really like you and I becoming friends. It has been so good, I think, for both of us, because there are different things within our life that are kind of like that are taken off, right? That are like what am I trying, like filed down. And so Danielle and I both have personalities that are sometimes like kind of intense, or like we think that we're always right. And so I think it's good that we're friends, because we're able to file that part down on the other person, because we're not afraid to say like, you're wrong. That's not how it is. And I think that we both needed that. We needed people who were willing to say that to us. And because of that, it makes us better, because then we're actually able to be more open-minded about things and not so stuck in our ways. And so I can see that that's kind of like a funnier side of it, but also truly like just in encouragement, or that is also sharpening each other. Like seeing the way that you're a friend to me then helps me to want to be a better friend to other people. And so there's like both sides to that of sharpening.
Yeah, definitely our personalities are more intense and assertive. And when I first transferred out to the school where we met at, I was like, what is this girl? Like, she's giving it right back to me. How dare she be just as assertive back? And then it is now one of the things I love the most about Annalise. It's because I trust her with like critique or criticism that she would have about me, because I also see how she holds herself to those same standards. And you could see that in the way that she lives her life and in just her personality and how assertive and intense. I like that in a friendship, and especially in our friendship. And so, but those things is like before, you don't always know you need, or you don't think you want, or you're even like, why? What? Don't give that back to me. Just be a more easygoing friend when I'm not doing something right.
Yeah.
Versus actually, like Annalise said, when you're filing each other down, sometimes that can even be like uncomfortable, like iron sharpening iron. That can look like a little bit uncomfortable process, maybe learning how to take criticism, or seeing things in yourself that you're like, oh, I don't really like that. And I didn't think I was like that in relationship, but I am. But it's all turns out to be so beautiful. And it's beautiful when it's in the confines of that friendship, which I think we've talked about that in marriage, where it's like that freedom to be loved and fully known, and that's beautiful. And there is a similar thing in a friendship relationship where you can be known and you can be loved, and there is that grace to mess up and make mistakes and not be perfect together, but you two want the best for each other and are just, yeah, that's what I think good friendship looks like.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know for me and Danielle, we have not always been good friends, even to each other. I don't think we've always been like the best. Looking back on certain things in college, Danielle was sharing a story not too long ago. And in the story, she was saying that she asked to be invited somewhere. And immediately after, I texted someone saying, like, oh, Danielle is trying to like tag along or whatever. And hearing that, I'm like, that's so rude. Why would I do that? Like, gossip about my friend wanting to like join in on our plans, like whatever, just make room and let someone else be a part of like this hangout. And so I can see as I'm getting older that I am becoming a better friend, and that there are definitely areas that I have had to work on to be a better friend. And so some of those things I would say number one would be the area of gossip. I think especially when you're younger, this is or maybe it's just it's like everywhere. Maybe it's not just when you're younger. At least for me, it was when I was younger. That I saw this be a part of so many of my relationships. It was just like normalized. And I remember in high school, I would share one thing with like one of my friends, and I just knew if I share it with them, our whole friend group's gonna know. And so I can see now as I've gotten older that I don't want to be that type of person who someone can't fully trust when they share things, or can't fully trust to be themselves because they don't know what that person's going to turn around and say about them. And so that is someone that I used to be when I was younger. And that is an area that I have definitely seen growth in, of not speaking badly about my friends. Like, I love these people. I want to encourage them. I want to bring them up. And if there are areas of concern, then I should be taking that up with them, not with other people. And so that's an area that I've seen growth. Another would be, and kind of similar, but in setting boundaries with friends. I know that, again, when I was younger, I didn't have very good boundaries with my friends, which allowed there to be codependency in the relationship, just relying on these people too much, or expecting that like we always have to sit together at like school, or we always have to sit together at youth group, or these different things. But then it just makes a relationship unhealthy, and it creates these unhealthy expectations. And I definitely allowed that in some of my relationships. And as a naive young person, realizing that it was unhealthy, I noticed I didn't want that in my friendships. But instead of having hard conversations with people about that, I just would cut people out of my life. And so if I deemed you as like toxic, instead of having a conversation and seeing if you were willing to change, I just assumed the answer for you. You're not willing to change,
Mm.
and I need you out of my life. And so I can see now, like, that was not gracious at all. And that definitely the more gracious approach would be to share how I'm feeling and the things that I'm seeing in our relationship that are unhealthy, and see if we are willing to make the changes to make the relationship better. And so those are a couple of things I've seen in my life, but I'm just curious about you, Danielle. Where have you seen growth, and maybe where did you struggle in the past?
And when Annalise and I are saying this, hopefully none of our friends are listening and being like, well, they're not perfect friends still anymore. So
Oh,
we're
yeah.
still learning and growing. And we're working through these things like everybody else. And so we're not here to say, like, oh, we're perfect friends to everybody in our life. But it's things that we've noticed about ourselves that we've been working on to try to be better in, and try to be better friends, that we're hoping will encourage you in that way to do the same. So we're by no means saying we're there yet or we're perfect, but we're going to continue to work and grow until hopefully we look as much like Christ as we will on this earth in friendship.
Hmm.
But things that I definitely had to work on was one, taking criticism from other people. I think one of the things in college, like I mentioned, Annalise was really good at being like, not calling out things in like a rude or mean way, but like talking to people about like, hey, like what is going on here in your life? And I did not. There was a stuff in college that I was walking in that was not aligning with like what my life with the Lord should have looked like. And Annalise would be like, "What are you doing?" And I would be like, "How dare she talk to me about this?" When I want to just go under the radar and nobody know. And so I had to get better at like taking criticism,
Hmm.
because in real friendship, you want to have that, and you want there to be grace and definitely like love in there. I think you can tell when someone loves you and is giving you criticism versus not. And that was definitely on Elise. She was doing it in love, she was doing it in grace, but I didn't want to hear it because I didn't want to be called out on my stuff. I wanted to live the life I wanted to live. And that's the risk of friendship. I mean, you do want to get better, but the risk is like people are going to call things out that maybe don't align with Christ, and it does feel bad. And so something I've had to grow in is taking criticism from other people and learning how to give criticism. And like Annalise was saying, like if there's behavior, not just giving like a critique, like, oh, you need to work on this, but trying to understand things from other people's point of view. If there was something that hurt me, trying to be like, okay, they probably didn't mean it like that. Why do I always just assume right away that someone meant to hurt me or is doing something to personally affect me? And just being like, hey, I felt sad when you did this, or I felt left out when you did this, or I felt X when you did this. And, I don't know if you meant to do it, but this is just how it affected me. And so I, just wanted to bring that to your attention. And I think a gracious friend, as you guys are growing together, will totally receive it in that way versus like, you did this and it was horrible and it makes you a bad friend.
Mhm.
And similar to Annalise, growing in trying not to gossip, I think it's one of the most pervasive things. And we'll probably do an episode on gossip itself. But learning how venting is still gossip.
Mhm.
And if you just want to vent about another friend, or you're like, I'm just saying this to know how to pray, and then like spilling someone's deepest, darkest secrets, um, that is still gossip and often still slander. And that is really hard sometimes when you're maybe holding something that someone's told you and you need counsel on it. I would say often first go to someone who can give you counsel in the same way we talked about in our marriage episode. It's not always your friends. And maybe if it is a friend, maybe it's a friend that doesn't know this mutual friend and what they're
Yeah.
going through. Maybe it's like a godly friend that's from a different part of your life. So they run into different circles that isn't going to know all this intimate personal information that isn't supposed to be known by that friend because you know it. I think also for me, something I would struggle with was I just really wanted to be heard. And so I would just often only talk about myself in friendship. And so I spent a lot of years, especially in high school, I struggled with this, like just talking about me. And I would assume if someone didn't just bring something up or like cut me off, that they didn't have anything to talk about. And I think, one of Annalise and I's gift is talking. That's why we have a podcast. And I feel like communication is one of my skills and Annalise's skills. But I think the dark side of that is I talk a lot. And so I can have the tendency to run people over, and people who aren't as assertive may never get a word in or tell me about how they were feeling. And so I've had to really work on asking intentional questions. Or if I feel like I'm talking too much, be like, hey, I'm really sorry that this is all about me. I really like, how are you doing? How are things like going with you? And being really intentional, and then really being like a good listener, because people can tell when you're not actually trying to listen to what they're um, wanting to say. So those are things that I've had to work on. I'm sure there's plenty more. And if you've been my friend, maybe you're thinking of things that you're like, oh, she didn't mention this. But I think there's plenty of things that Annalise and I have had to work on over the years. But those are probably what's coming to the top of my mind that I am still actually working to cut out a lot of the time in my relationships that one day I hope the Lord will just take. But things like gossip, there's always going to be the temptation, always, I think. And so things like that, like taming the tongue, they talk about it so much in the Bible about how like the tongue is like that's what's coming out of the heart. And so if in your friendships, you're only gossiping and only slandering and you can only talk about other people, that might be a friendship problem, that you guys aren't talking about like things that edify you both together. You're not talking about the word. You're not talking about how you're doing. It centers around, do we have things about other people to talk about? It just might be something to check your heart in. Be like, okay, like why am I so concerned with other people? And not like, why don't I have other things to talk about? Like, why don't I have things that I want to bring up with my friends besides other people? So that's not to judge. That's not to shame anyone. It's just something that it's a marker that Annalise and I use it's like, okay, what are we wanting to talk about? And then what does that say about our heart?
Mhm.
So Annalise, we've talked about, how we used to be as friends, what we're working towards, and what we're working to maybe cut out of our life in friendship. What does being a good friend look like?
Yeah. And so I guess maybe this is what it looks like to me, and that might change for each person. But it is very important to me that a friend is someone I can trust. We were kind of talking about that, and it does lend itself like to the gossip thing. But yeah, I want to have friends who I know that I can trust to share things with, and it'll be private with them, but also people that I even trust to receive advice from. People who I trust are actively pursuing the Lord, and so the wisdom that they give me is going to be from the Lord. And so that's really important, as well as finding people who I can be myself around. And I have said this with several people. But sometimes you just find those people and it's just like, I can be me. And that is such a good feeling. And so um that's really important, that you find people that you can be yourself around, your true self. And there is not judgment about that. You can be like super goofy and laughing and those things, but also you can be crying and sharing the sad parts of your life, or sometimes you being yourself looks like being annoying, or like accidentally being like kind of rude, and then that person can handle it and let you know, like, don't speak to me like that, whatever. So just finding people who I can just be myself around.
Mm.
And then um also, I am in a point in my life where I kind of need low maintenance friends. I life is there's a lot going on, and being married, a lot of my attention goes to my husband, being a part of my like a church and serving and working and being in school. A lot of attention is going to these things, and I do honor and value my friendship so much. But it is easier for me to have friends who don't have like such high expectations of me. And I still like will reach out to friends, reach out to hang out with them, but I just can't really have friends who want to hang out constantly, or being talked to constantly. And
Mm.
so again, this might look different for different seasons of my life. I think probably in college I had a lot more free time, so I was constantly hanging out with people and wanting to constantly be with people. And so it just looks a little bit different in this season. And then lastly, I think a marker of a good friend is someone who's able to celebrate like the highs in someone's life, and then also someone who can be with you, a shoulder to cry on in the harder seasons of life. And I know for me, I have felt so loved in certain seasons because of people showing up. And so like Danielle, like when I was getting married, and I have another friend Asha, when I was getting married, just like we're so intentional, like sending little gifts or sending like whatever, asking how they can help. And both of them really were a big help in that season, and that meant so much to me. And then also in seasons of sadness, like losing my uncle, and I come home, and my friend Lauren and my friend Alyssa had like dropped off like flowers and different things. And so that just means a lot. And I think because I've received in that way, it has made me want to make sure that I'm also doing that for other people in their big moments of getting engaged, or their hard moments um, of loss. To be intentional, to show those people like, hey, I see you, and I value you, and I love you, and maybe I can show this like in a little gift. And so that is what being a good friend has looked like in my life. Those are usually the markers of good friends to me, at least in this season. But I would
Mm.
be curious to hear more from you, Danielle, about what does that look like? What do you think being a good friend looks like?
I would echo so Penis sneeze too. I would echo so much of what you said. I think the same. For me, it's definitely changes. I think for with each season of life, like you said in college, it's different than what my friendships look like now. And I think for a good friend, it's also recognizing that not all of your friends are going to be your best friend. And if they are your closest friend at the time, they may not always be your closest friend forever. And that comes with grief and just all sorts of feelings about change. But I think being a good friend is being able to go through those seasons of some being more close and some not being as close, and riding that seamlessly. Like, I have friends that in some seasons we are so close and we really find the time to call all the time or to text or to see each other. And some seasons are not like that. And those seasons could be months or half a year things. And so it's like you said, having friends that are just willing to go through those and not feel self-conscious about a relationship because we understand the depth of what we have about each other and we're still praying for each other and thinking of each other. I think being a good friend is also praying for your friends.
Mm.
And this is something I think a lot of us say we do, and I catch myself doing it all the time, like saying I'm going to pray for someone and then not. But I've been really intentional the last few months about praying for my friends
Mm.
and praying, like bringing them to the Lord, asking the Lord to speak into their life, asking how I can be a better friend to them, asking the Lord just, yeah, things about situations I know about or what I know is going on in their life, just to be in that, just to be with them. I think it's advocating for your friends in prayer and lifting them up. I think is one of the most important things you can do in a godly friendship. And like Annalise said, being there for each other. Relationships, any relationship is not always 50-50. You even think of a marriage. It's not always 50-50. Some people might be going through a rough time and not have everything to give and vice versa. And so I think a common misconception I see maybe on social media is this idea of like, if someone affects your peace or like if someone's too much or if someone's just venting too much, or that term like trauma dumping, like that's not a person that's worth being friends with. But if you think about it, for so long, there weren't therapists or mental health professionals or things like that. People worked through grief, people worked through trauma, people worked through a lot of things in community, in friendships. And there's definitely a need and a place for mental health professionals and therapists. But I do think being a good friend is being able to sit in grief and sorrow and hard things that people are experiencing and not just run away and not just pull out and not just be like, this person's too much. Like this season, I can't handle. I'll come back when things are a little bit easier. I think to the extent of like what you can give and what you can offer, but really being a good friend in hard times is often just listening. You really don't have to say anything a lot of the time. It's being willing to listen, being available for that, being someone that's reliable and can be counted on in those areas of life. And again, like I said, bringing them to the Lord. That's what does the most, I think, for being a good friend. Similar to Annalise said, it's being someone that people can be themselves around, not being judgmental, not, being someone that can't be trusted with hard information or good information, maybe that they just don't want to share right away or things like that. I think those are the markers of a good and godly friendship. In Annalise and I's friendship, we haven't always been as close. And so in college, she was definitely one of my close friends. But right now, in this season of life, Annalise and I are in very similar seasons of life. She is one of my best friends, honestly. We're so close. I can share anything with her, but it hasn't always been like that. And so, not in a bad way, but because we were in different stages of life, or, we were just had other friends or all sorts of things. And so I think a marker of a good friendship is always having that depth, is being willing to change, understanding some seasons you may be closer to people than others, and then being willing to go along with that flow of what life looks like in relationships. I think if you're always holding someone to the past and what kind of friend they were to you, or you were my best friend and now you're not, and not that anything bad happened, but you're kind of just not accepting where you are in life, I think that can make you bitter in a friendship and
Mm.
sad. And those are conversations you could have with someone, but a good friend and a good friendship will change over time. They just will. And so I think it's being willing to do that.
I think that's really important to acknowledge the seasons that friendships can go in, and that sometimes you are closer with certain friends at certain times, and that might look different than it did a couple years ago. And I know for me, at first, that was really difficult to see friends changing. That still my friend, but the friendship looked different. And so I think it was really important for me that I couldn't compare new friendships to friendships that I had in the past. That just seemed very unhealthy. And it was something that I was doing of like, with that friend, like I used to feel like I could do blah, blah, blah. Or with that friend, we used to do fill in the blank, but instead just accepting where I was in life and accepting the people that I had in my life and seeing, well, what do they have? These people have so much within them, and I have so much that I can give them. And so just accepting that each friendship in our life looks different because everyone is different. So those friendships are going to be different, and not comparing them to friendships of the past or even friendships that you currently have. And then on that topic of comparison, I feel like that is a really important topic to hit when it comes to friendship. I think that sometimes within friendship, we can begin to feel jealousy over certain things. And again, as Danielle was saying, like these are all things that we'll probably continue to struggle with. And I do, which it's exciting. I do see that this used to be something I struggled with more when I was younger, and that like as you're getting older and working towards these things, it seems like you struggle with them less. But again, that idea or that feeling still comes back of maybe jealousy of people's friendships that they have together, or jealousy of um something that's happening in your friend's life but you're not seeing in your own. And
Mm.
I was actually just having a conversation with my sister about this because I'm applying for a job, and I just found out that one of my friends and someone I go to school with is also applying for the job. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I feel like she's more qualified. She's probably going to get it." And there can be like that little bit of like, but I want the job, right? And my sister was saying that another podcast that she listens to, but I think her name's Annie F. Downs. I don't really know. I think that's her name. And this lady has wanted to be married for many years and is single. And she has been in a lot of friends' weddings, has celebrated a lot of friends. And I think she's even like officiated some friends' weddings. And that people will ask her, like, is that really hard for you to do that, to celebrate your friends in that way when that's something that you haven't experienced? And she'll say to them, like, those weren't my husband, like that's their husband, like I wasn't meant to marry those people, so yeah, I can celebrate them. And so I think that's a really good way to look at it when our friends are maybe receiving things that we're not, or things that we've been asking for, of like, that wasn't yours, like that's their husband or that's their job, like there's a different job for you.
Mm.
And so just that allows us then to celebrate when those things happen, like you're right, that is her husband, like that is her job, like I get to celebrate that she found it and that she's in this great, like this thing that's a great fit for her. And so yeah, maybe just take that with you if you're feeling a little bit like insecure about like your life compared to one of your friends. Like, she's different than you, so
Mm.
her life and the things that she receives and accomplishes are going to be different.
Yeah. I think another thing that made me think of was you aren't going to be friends with everyone you're friends with forever.
Mm,
And sometimes your life is going to take you different places, but also your relationship with the Lord may take you different places.
mm,
And you may have friends from high school or college that aren't in the same boat with you. And so friendship is okay if it looks different. If you can't have people as close that aren't following the Lord in the same way. And there's a difference, I think, where um, talked about in the New Testament, Paul talked about it, where it's different to be friends with people who maybe don't believe in God, and you don't expect people who don't believe in God to obviously act like a Christian. I don't expect anyone who's not a Christian to be like following the Lord in the way that I would, because that would be silly to expect. But if your friends who are following the Lord are not doing it wholeheartedly or in a way that's like a good influence on you, it's okay to pray and take a step back from that. I think
mhm,
something that's important is your relationship with the Lord has to be first. And we can't always think in relationship that we are going to be the better influences on someone else than they will be on us. And so it's imagining your life like, okay, what if I do start becoming more like them? What if my habits, what if the way I talk, what if the way all the things becomes more like that friend? Would I feel would I feel good? Would that be something that I
mhm,
would be happy with? Would that be something the Lord would be happy with? And so praying about that, and again, not just cutting people off, But
Right.
sometimes that might give you a chance in friendship to sit down with someone and be like, hey, I've seen these things in you and I've been praying for you. And, would you want to talk about that? Am trying not to gossip. I'm trying not to slander. And sometimes I feel like that happens a lot when we're together. And so maybe I'd appreciate if we don't do that together. Maybe they don't even realize. And again, that's the beauty of friendship. But it's also giving you permission that you're not going to be friends with everyone forever. Everyone takes a different journey in life, a different journey with the Lord. And that's okay. It's doing it in a mature way, having hard conversations, being willing to also stick out seasons that might be hard versus like, this is something I can't be in because it's behavior that's not like following the Lord or aligned with the Lord or aligned with the way that I'm going in my life right now. And all those things are okay. That takes discernment and wisdom and a lot of grace and forgiveness between friends. But that's also the beauty of friendship, that some friendships are for a season and for a time and not forever. And that is not bad. That's not
Mhm.
bad. It's a good thing because we're going to meet so many wonderful people in our life that we get to be friends with and we get to learn and grow with. And each season, those people might be different, and that's okay. And so, like Annalise said, don't compare yourself to maybe your friends or maybe the friendship your friends have with someone else, because you don't know what's going on in their life. You don't know that maybe they're close because of something that's not that great. That you wouldn't want that to happen to you, so you could bond to them because of it or something like that. Comparison is the thief of joy in all things, in our marriages, in our friendships, in our walk with the Lord. And so don't let that steal the joy from friendship for you.
Yeah, and you mentioned like how sometimes friends that we're closer with, some maybe later on in life we're not as close with, but they're still friends, and we can see that in Jesus's life with like the inner circle, right? So he has those people that he is closer to, and then there's the disciples, and again he's very close with those people, but there is maybe a bit more distance, and so it's okay to have people that you're friends with but you do hold some distance with. Maybe you're not going to share certain things with them, or ask some advice on certain things that
Mm,
you would with your inner circle. And again, on that same note, there's a quote about how we become like the five closest people to us. And so really it is important to look at those people that are the closest to us. And for me, I want the closest people to me to be people who are going after the Lord. I want it to be people who are practicing the things that are in the Bible. And I want this because that's what I want in my life. And so if they are going to be influencing me to the degree that I'm going to become like them, then I want those closest people to be people that I really admire and look up to. And so I have room for other friends, but in my life, I will have a boundary that they wouldn't be the closest people to me if
mm.
they don't exemplify those things.
That's so good. And it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's protecting yourself and being like, I value our friendship and I can still have this friendship if you're not one of the closest people to me. And that's loving, I think, where it's like, I wouldn't have to just not be friends with you. Because we're not saying don't be friends with people because they have sin in their life, because then you'd never
Mhm.
be friends with anybody. But
Right.
it is respecting the people that are closest to you, wanting to be like, if I became like the five closest people in my life, wow, like I admire so many things about like Annalise. Like if I became like Annalise, I'm going to be assertive. I'm going to care about justice. I'm going to love the Lord. I'm going to be in the word. I'm going to be disciplined. Those are things I want. And when I look at her and I see the woman she is, I'm like, yes, that's someone I would not mind becoming at all. And so those are the people that it's like, when you're forming who's closest to me in my life, that's what should happen. You shouldn't be like,
Mhm.
oh yeah, I don't know if I'd love to. I
Yeah.
don't know if I'd love to be like them. Like they're funny, but I don't really know if I'd like to turn into them. And that's not a bad thing. I think boundaries are loving, boundaries are good, and those friends may be in a different season. Someone you're like, yeah, I really do want to emulate, and that's why being open to change and being flexible is loving and just a beautiful part of friendship, even though sometimes it does take a little bit of grief.
Mhm.
So Annalise, we've talked a lot about friendship, who we used to be, what we're looking for in friendship, what being a godly friend looks like to us, and some other things we've thought about friendship. Now, how do you find godly friends?
Yeah. I think it's so important to get plugged into a church. If you're looking for godly friends, where like what better place to go to than the hub of godly people? And so, yeah, get involved in a church, maybe join a small group or volunteer within your church, meet people. And this, I know for me, has been a great way for me to find friends. And I think it goes back to comparison. Don't compare the people within this church to maybe friends you had in the past, but be open to making new friends, and maybe these friends have a little bit different interests than friends in the past, or they might yeah, maybe they work in different areas, whatever, but just be open to new people. And yeah, I think also remembering that it takes time to build friendship. And that's why it's so important, I think, also not to compare friendships, because if we're comparing someone we just met to a friendship that we've had for years, no, the friendship's not going to compare because we like hardly know this person we just met. And so allow yourself to take time to invest in these people, to get to know them, to share of yourself, to be a good friend, right? To receive a good friend, often we need to be a good friend. And so those things that we talked about, of like showing up when people are
Mm,
experiencing good moments, or showing up for people when they're experiencing sad moments, that's going to speak volumes. And remembering things about people, things that they share to you, like caring about them, empathizing with those people, that is going to allow you to create friendships, because who wouldn't want to be friends with a person like that?
yeah.
Yeah, what else do you think, Danielle?
Yeah, I think 100% I would agree with all of that. I think, making yourself the person you'd want to be friends with, being generous with your friends.
Yeah.
Be someone who, if they're celebrating, celebrate with them in whatever way. If they're mourning, mourn with them in whatever way. Cook meals, buy coffee. Be so generous. Pour yourself out for your friends and the people in your life, because that's what matters. Think about the people in your life. Love them well. Love your friends well. It's that is someone people want to be in a relationship with, and that's a
Hmm.
way to find godly friends. Be someone that you'd want to be in a godly relationship with. Be someone that a godly person would want to be in a relationship with. That's going to sharpen them as well. And
Yeah.
again, it's not being perfect. You're never going to be perfect. It's just following the Lord. It's pursuing Him and His plan for your life. I would also say that, like Annalise said, it takes time. That also means it takes effort. So don't judge people you just met that you're like, oh, we're so different. We're not going to be friends. I've done that so many times, and those people end up being my closest friends. Something I love in friendship is I love to laugh. I love laughing with my friends. My college friends are some of the funniest people I've ever met. We've got a great group of girls. We laugh and laugh and laugh. And so I always compare people to those friends, or friends I have from childhood that I can laugh with. But it took time for us to get to that place and
Hmm.
to know each other well, and to be able to, understand each other's humor and just riff off of each other and just have a good time, and then also get into those deep conversations. That took effort and time to build, intentional effort that everyone in the friendship put in together. And so remember, don't judge people right off the bat. Put in the effort, put in the time. And lastly, I would say ask the Lord. Many times I've been in seasons of life where I'm like, God, I'm so lonely, asking the Lord to provide friends, and He does. When I first transferred out to North Central, I wanted a girl group of friends so bad. I had always seen people have them, and I was like, God, I want a godly group of girlfriends. I was an engineering major before I transferred out. I had a lot of guy friends, and so I was like, Lord, I want a group of girlfriends, and He gave me the best group of girlfriends. That's where Annalise comes from. That's where so many of my dearest friends come from, and He provides. And it's not always maybe exactly what you think it needs to look like. Maybe you're praying for a group of girlfriends and God's like, you got plenty, I'm giving you one. Like, you don't need a whole group right now. But the Lord obviously sees such benefit in relationship. Jesus had friends. God is communal. And so He is going to be faithful and provide that. Some seasons of life might just be lonelier, and God does things in those seasons too. But He does not want us to be absent of friends or lonely for the long term. God
Hmm.
is also our friend. And so asking him for what we need, letting him be a dear friend to us, letting him know us, going to him first with our problems will also make us better friends to others when we don't put them in God's position in our heart. So when we don't make
Mhm.
idols out of our friends, when they're not like Annalise said, we're not codependent with them or making them fill a void that the Lord is supposed to fill, then that is something that's going to be like, oh, we're going to find these good friends and have these healthy friendships with them. So
Yeah.
pray, ask the Lord for those friends. He's faithful.
Yeah. And so I co-lead a small group in the youth group, and the lady I co-lead with was sharing, we were talking about friendships actually, and she said that her pastor's wife from an old church told her that whenever you walk into a room, don't walk into it and say, "Here I am," but rather walk into the room and say, "There you are." So instead of going into these friendships of like, people need to approach me, right? Here I am, approach me. And here I am, be my friend. Instead, say, there you are, I'm going to approach you. There you are, I'm going to be a good friend to you. And so I think also it comes like with this mindset shift of how can I be a friend?
Yeah, that's so good. When we think about others outside of ourselves, we become more Christ-like. We become a better friend. We become better
Hmm.
we become better all around. And so, like Annalise said, think about people first. We spend something like, the statistic is crazy, like 90 to 95% of the time thinking about only ourselves. And that's never going to make us good friends. That's never going to make us more like Christ. And so even getting out of that and going up to people, investing in people first, even if they haven't invested in you first, asking people questions, even if they haven't asked questions of you first. Be that person first if you need to, because that could inspire others to do the same, and I think is only going to have a beautiful ripple effect. Like
Hmm.
Annalise said, it's not about us, and friendship's not about us. All relationships aren't about us. So if we go into these things and are only like, what could I get out of it? What could people get me? We're not going to have healthy or godly friendships. And so go into these friendships eyes wide open with people, not judging at first, not comparing them, and being like, I'm gonna invest first. I'm gonna try really hard. I'm gonna be a great friend. I'm going to be asking people out to coffee. I'm going to be
Hmm.
treating them when I get there. I'm going to be generous, even if we're not best friends yet, because that would be someone I want to be friends with. And so I'm going to
Yeah.
be that person.
Yeah. That's really good.
So, thank you for tuning in to our last episode of the Your Two Best Friends podcast. And how fitting that we end talking about friendship and how to have a godly friendship, how to be a godly friend. I'm sure there's so many more things that maybe you're thinking about that hopefully this inspires other things like, oh, this is a way I can be a better friend, or this is something I want to work on, or something I need out of friendship. We're hoping that it does that for you and encourages you to go make friends in your life, to build those relationships, and to love people better because you love the Lord better, because that's the ultimate goal. That's what friendship points us towards. We're so thankful that you've tuned in to season 1. We are taking a break between season 1 and season 2. So you guys have about a month to catch up on any podcast episodes you may have missed, to let us know any topics or podcast episodes that you hope to hear. Thankfully, we may have covered all these episodes perfect because no one had any questions, but we're
Yeah.
still taking questions, and we'd love to hear from you about anything from any podcast episode in season 1 that we can answer in an episode in season 2 if you have anything that you'd like us to talk about further. The last thing that we will recommend is another resource that we've been recommending. If you love podcasts and you like what we talk about, you'll have plenty of other episodes to listen to in the break between our season 1 and season 2. It's called the Head to Heart podcast by Jenny Markham, who's a dear friend of mine and has wonderful episodes on being free from so many things that maybe hold you back in your relationship with the Lord. She's got loads and loads of seasons that you can go back in if you need another podcast to fulfill the Your Two Best Friends void in the next month. We're so thankful for everyone who's listened and participated on Instagram and just joined us for this podcast in season 1. We've had so much fun, and we look forward to seeing you all on season